The howling wind cut through the air like invisible knives as Jack stumbled through the deep snow. His boots sank with each step, and the emergency lights on his suit blinked an angry red. The crash had damaged most of his equipment, leaving him with only 6 hours of power remaining. On planet XO3, that was as good as a death sentence. Status report. He commanded his suit's AI, his breath forming frost inside his helmet. Primary systems damage. Temperature outside, -148 degrees Celsius. Suit power, 23%. Estimated survival time, 5 hours, 42 minutes. Jack looked back at his scout ship, now nothing more than twisted metal buried in the snow. The raiders had come out of nowhere, their ships unmarked and their weapons too powerful for his small vessel. He'd managed to shoot one down before crashing, but that was little comfort now. The emergency shelter pod in his ship was crushed. Without it, he needed to find shelter before nightfall, when temperatures would drop even further. His military training kicked in, helping him push aside the panic trying to claw its way up his throat. Scan for any structures or geological formations within walking distance, he ordered, forcing himself to keep moving. Standing still meant death on this ice ball of a planet. Scanning. Alert. Large metallic structure detected 2 kilometers northeast. Appears to be recent crash site. Jack's heart jumped. Another crash site meant possible shelter, supplies, or even survivors. It could also mean raiders, but with his power running low, he had no choice but to risk it. He trudged through the snow, each step carefully placed to conserve energy. His training at the Human Space Marine Corps had prepared him for survival situations, but this was extreme even by their standards. XO3 was classified as a death world, a planet so hostile that even automated mining operations struggled to survive here. As he walked, Jack checked his remaining equipment. His rifle still worked, though the cold was affecting its charge rate. He had 3 emergency ration bars, a basic medical kit, and his combat knife. The communicator was dead, smashed in the crash. The suit's locator beacon was still transmitting, but rescue ships would take at least 2 days to reach this sector. 2 days. He'd be frozen solid in 6 hours. The crash site came into view through the swirling snow. It was bigger than his ship, with a design he didn't recognize. Definitely not human, and not like the raiders' ships either. The vessel had carved a deep trench through the ice. Its hull breached in several places, but largely intact. Scan for life signs, Jack commanded, crouching behind a chunk of ice and raising his rifle. The cold was starting to seep through his suit's joints, making his movements stiff. One life sign detected inside the vessel. Non-human. Biological signature suggests elevated body temperature. Jack's training made him cautious, but his situation made him desperate. High body temperature meant the creature inside might be from a species adapted to cold environments. That could be either very good or very bad for his survival. He approached the ship carefully, noting its military design. The hull markings were partially covered in ice, but he recognized them. This was a ship belonging to the Mountain Empire, a civilization of reptilian warriors who'd been in a cold war with humanity for the past 30 years. Power levels critical, his suit warned. 4 hours of life support remaining. Jack took a deep breath. He had 2 choices: risk approaching a potentially hostile alien warrior, or freeze to death in the wasteland. The human way had always been to take action, rather than accept death passively. He moved toward the ship's broken hull, rifle ready but not aimed to fire. As he stepped through the breach, his suit's lights illuminated the interior, revealing a cockpit twisted by the crash. And there, strapped in the command chair, was a massive figure in dark armor, moving slightly and letting out a low growl. The warrior was alive, and Jack's next actions would determine if either of them survived the coming night. The alien warrior moved suddenly, raising a weapon with surprising speed despite her injuries. Jack could tell it was a female of her species by the distinctive crest patterns on her armor, something he'd learned during his military briefings about the Mountain Empire. "Stay where you are, human," she growled in perfect English, her voice deep and commanding. "One more step, and I'll end your miserable life." Jack remained still, keeping his rifle pointed at the ground. "Your ship's systems are dead," he said calmly. "And by the way you're sitting, I'd say you have at least one broken leg. We both crashed. We both need help." The warrior's helmet retracted, revealing scaled skin that seemed to shimmer with heat. Her eyes were bright amber, with vertical pupils that studied him intensely. "I am Commander K of the Mountain Empire's 3rd Fleet, and you are my enemy. I'm Jack, Human Space Marine Corps. And right now, our only enemy is this planet." He gestured to his suit's blinking morning lights. "My power is failing. In 4 hours, I'll freeze to death. You're injured. Maybe we can help each other." Kay's laugh was harsh. "Help each other? Your kind has been our enemy for 3 decades. Give me one reason why I shouldn't shoot you right now." "Because you're smart enough to know that if you wanted to shoot me, you would have done it already," Jack replied, slowly lowering his rifle to the ground. "And because I have a medical kit that might help with that leg." The warrior's eyes narrowed, but Jack noticed her weapon lowering slightly. He could see now that she was trapped in her command chair, the crash having crushed the lower console around her legs. Despite her species' legendary strength, she couldn't free herself alone. "My body temperature runs at what you'd consider a fever," Kay said after a long moment. "That's why we can survive extreme cold. But even I cannot last long in these temperatures without my ship's systems." She paused, studying him. "And you brought medical supplies, you say?" Jack nodded, slowly reaching for his medkit. "Standard issue. Designed to work on most known species. Your people's biology was included in the database after our first contact." "Approach slowly," Kay commanded, though her weapon was now pointed at the floor. "If you try anything, I'll die in the cold." "Yes, I get it," Jack finished, moving carefully toward her. His suit beeped another warning about power levels, adding urgency to his movements. As he got closer, he could feel the heat radiating from her body. It was like standing near a running engine. No wonder her species could survive in cold environments. They were like walking furnaces. Kay watched every move as Jack examined the crushed console pinning her legs. "The medical scan shows clean breaks," he said, checking his handheld scanner. "Nothing that won't heal, but we need to get you free first." "We?" Kay's tone was challenging, but there was a hint of curiosity in it. "Yes, we, because I have the tools and knowledge to help you, and you have enough body heat to keep us both alive through the night. So unless you want to die alone from your injuries, and unless I want to freeze to death in the snow, we need each other." The warrior was quiet for a long moment, the only sound being the howling wind outside and the beeping of Jack's failing suit. Finally, she spoke. "The sleeping pod in the rear compartment is still intact. It's designed to regulate body temperature." She fixed him with a hard stare. "If you help me reach it, we might both survive until rescue comes." Jack smiled behind his helmet. "Now that's the kind of cooperation that'll keep us alive. But first, let's get you out of this chair, Commander." "You may call me Kay," she said, holstering her weapon. "But if you betray my trust, Human, the cold will be the least of your worries." Jack's hands were shaking as he worked to free Kay from the crushed console. The cold was getting worse, and his suit's power was dropping faster than expected. The damaged systems weren't handling the extreme temperature well. "Hold still," he said, using a small laser cutter from his emergency kit. "I need to cut through this panel without hitting your leg." Kay watched him work, her amber eyes tracking every movement. "Your hands are shaking, Human. Is your suit failing already?" 3 hours of power left, Jack admitted, focusing on the metal before him. "Maybe less with these temperatures." The warrior shifted slightly, and Jack felt another wave of heat roll off her body. "Then we must hurry. The sleeping pod is our only chance of survival." She paused, then added, "You did not ask why I speak your language so well." Jack carefully cut through another section of metal. "Figured you'd tell me if you wanted to." Military intelligence said your people are big on honor. If you're speaking English, you probably have a good reason. A sound like distant thunder came from Kay's chest. A laugh, Jack realized. Smart human. Yes, we believe in studying our enemies closely. I learned your language to better understand your kind. She winced as Jack moved a piece of metal away from her leg. Though I admit, you are not what I expected. Power at 15%, Jack's suit announced. Warning, temperature regulation failing. Kay's expression changed, becoming more serious. Listen carefully, human. Once you free me, we must reach the sleeping pod quickly. It's designed for one of my kind, but it will fit us both. However, she fixed him with an intense stare. You must remove your suit. Jack's hands stopped moving. Remove my suit. In this temperature, the pod cannot regulate your temperature through that metal shell, Kay explained. And my body heat is our only power source until rescue comes. So yes, you must strip down to your basic clothing. Her mandibles clicked. A sign of amusement, Jack guessed, unless you prefer to freeze. Finally, the last piece of metal came free. Kay immediately tried to stand, but her leg buckled. Jack caught her arm, surprised by how warm it felt even through his suit. The sleeping pod, she ordered through gritted teeth. Now, before your suit fails completely. They moved slowly through the ship's tilted corridor, Kay leaning heavily on Jack. Even injured, she was impressively strong. The sleeping pod was in a small chamber near the ship's rear, a metallic capsule that looked barely big enough for Kay alone. Power at 10%. Critical failure imminent. Kay pressed her hand to the pod's control panel, and it opened with a hiss. The inside was lined with some kind of soft material that seemed to glow with stored heat. Now comes your choice, human, Kay said, turning to face Jack. Remove your suit and share the pod with me, using my body heat to survive the night or die in the cold. Decide quickly. Jack looked at his suit's power readings, then at the howling snowstorm visible through a crack in the ship's hull. The temperature was still dropping. His suit had maybe 20 minutes of power left. There's really no choice at all, is there? He said, reaching for his helmet seals. But I have one condition. Kay's eyes narrowed. You are in no position to make conditions, human. Maybe not, Jack agreed. But here it is anyway. We watch each other's backs. No killing each other in our sleep. Deal. For a moment, Kay just stared at him. Then she nodded slowly. You have my word as a warrior. Now hurry. I can see your lips turning blue already. As Jack began removing his failing suit, he wondered if he was making the right choice. But as another blast of Arctic wind howled through the ship, he knew that trust was now his only option for survival. Inside the sleeping pod, Jack could finally feel his fingers again. The warmth radiating from Kay's body was incredible, like lying next to a hot radiator. In his thermal undersuit, he was actually starting to feel comfortable for the first time since the crash. Your heart rate is returning to normal, Kay observed, her voice surprisingly soft in the confined space. I was concerned you might not survive the transition from your suit. Those few seconds felt like forever, Jack admitted, remembering the burning cold that had hit him when he removed his protective gear. But I guess humans are tougher than your people think. The pod was a tight fit for both of them. Kay's massive frame took up most of the space, with Jack pressed against her side. The material lining the pod seemed to capture and reflect her body heat, creating a cocoon of warmth. Tell me, human, Kay said after a while. Why were you in this sector? This is far from your usual patrol routes. Jack considered his answer carefully. Following up on some unusual readings. Ships disappearing without explanation. Both human and Mountain Empire vessels. He turned his head to look at her. I'm guessing that's why you're here too. Kay's scales shifted color slightly. A sign of surprise. Jack guessed. You are correct. 3 of our scout ships vanished in this region. The raiders who attacked us, they are not normal pirates. No, they're not, Jack agreed. Their weapons were too advanced, and they knew exactly how to disable our engines. He shifted slightly, trying to get more comfortable. Someone's been arming them. A low rumble came from Kay's chest, a sound of agreement. In the Mountain Empire, we have a saying. When two enemies face the same shadow, perhaps they are not enemies at all. Jack smiled. On Earth, we say the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Perhaps our peoples are not so different after all, Kay mused. She winced suddenly, her injured leg shifting. Let me check that splint, Jack offered, reaching for her leg. His medical training kicked in as he examined the temporary brace he'd made. The bone's already starting to knit. Your healing rate is amazing. We evolved on a world of predators and storms, Kay explained. Quick healing meant survival. She watched as he adjusted the splint. Your medical knowledge is impressive. Most humans I've encountered were soldiers or diplomats. I was a combat medic before becoming a scout, Jack said. Saved lives on both sides during the border skirmishes. A wounded person is just a person who needs help, no matter their species. Kay was quiet for a moment. That is an honorable view. She shifted again, making space in the pod. Rest now, human. The night will be long, and we must conserve energy. As if to emphasize her point, a particularly violent gust of wind shook the damaged ship around them. The temperature gauge on the pod's inner wall showed the outside had dropped to -160 degrees. You know, Jack said, feeling sleep starting to creep in as the warmth and exhaustion took hold. For a fearsome warrior of the Mountain Empire, you make a pretty good heating system. Kay's surprised laugh filled the pod. And for a fragile human, you are surprisingly useful. Now sleep. Tomorrow we must repair what we can and prepare for the raiders' return. As Jack drifted off to sleep, he realized something strange. He felt safer right now, curled up next to an alien warrior who had threatened to kill him just hours ago, than he had in a long time. Maybe there was hope for their species after all. The night stretched on, and in their warm cocoon, human and alien warrior slept side by side, while outside, the deadly cold of XO3 raged on. The sound of engines overhead woke them both. Jack's eyes snapped open, meeting Kay's alert gaze. They'd survived the night, but now a new danger had found them. Raiders, Kay growled, her scales darkening with anger. 3 ships, by the sound of it. Jack quickly pulled on his now powerless suit for protection against weapons fire, if not the cold. They're landing to check the wreckage. Standard scavenger procedure. Can you fight? Kay asked, testing her injured leg. It held her weight now, though she still moved stiffly. I have spare weapons in the emergency locker. I can fight, Jack confirmed, accepting a strange-looking rifle she handed him. How do I use this? Kay showed him the basic controls. It responds to body heat. That's why your powered-down suit couldn't use it. But your bare hand on the grip will work. She grinned, showing impressive teeth. You run hot enough for that. At least. Outside, they heard the crunch of boots on snow. The raiders were getting closer. 6 of them, Kay whispered, checking a small scanner. 2 at your ship, 4 heading this way. They're wearing cold weather gear, but it's not as good as your suit was. They can't stay out long. Jack nodded, positioning himself near a breach in the hull. We have the advantage then. They'll want to work fast, which means they'll be careless. You think like a warrior, Kay approved. She moved to another position, her movements silent despite her size. Take the 2 on the left. I'll handle the right side. The raiders appeared through the swirling snow, tall figures in mismatched armor, carrying advanced weapons. They moved with the confidence of predators who weren't expecting resistance. Jack waited until they were close, then fired. Kay's weapon was surprisingly accurate, the heat-seeking bolt striking the first raider square in the chest. Before the others could react, Kay burst from her hiding spot, her own weapon roaring. The battle was fierce, but short. The raiders clearly weren't expecting to face a human and a Mountain Empire warrior fighting together. Two fell to Jack's precise shots, while Kay's strength and combat experience dealt with the others. "Behind you," Kay shouted suddenly. Jack spun to see another raider emerging from the storm, weapon raised. Before he could react, Kay had thrown her rifle at the raider's head with incredible force, knocking them down. Jack didn't waste the opportunity. He charged forward, tackling the fallen raider and knocking their weapon away. The raider fought back, but between the cold and Jack's combat training, they didn't stand a chance. "The other two are running back to their ships," Kay reported, limping to his side. "But look at this." She pulled off the raider's helmet, revealing a face that made them both freeze in surprise. "That's impossible," Jack breathed. "These markings, they're from the Peace Council." The unconscious raider's face bore the distinctive tattoos of the Interstellar Peace Council, the very organization that was supposed to be mediating between humans and the Mountain Empire. "No wonder they had such advanced weapons," Kay snarled. "They've been playing both sides, keeping our peoples at war while they profit from it." Jack quickly searched the raider, finding data chips and communication devices. "This is evidence, proof of what's really been happening out here. If we survive to deliver it," Kay reminded him. "The temperature is dropping again, and now we have wounded raiders to deal with." Jack looked at the fallen raiders, then at Kay. "We can't just let them freeze, can we?" Kay's expression softened slightly. "No, your human compassion is rubbing off on me already." She sighed. "Help me drag them to the cargo hold. We can seal it and use my emergency heaters to keep them alive." "And us?" Jack asked, already knowing the answer. Kay's mandibles clicked in what he now recognized as amusement. "Back to the sleeping pod, human. Unless you prefer freezing with our prisoners." Together, they began securing their captives, both knowing that their discovery had changed everything. The real war wasn't between their peoples, it was against those who wanted to keep them apart. Back in the sleeping pod, Jack examined the data chips they'd taken from the raiders, while Kay studied their communication devices. The warmth of her body kept the cold at bay, allowing them to work without worry about freezing. "Look at this," Jack said, holding up one of the chips to the pod's internal light. "These aren't just mission orders. They're full operation logs going back 3 years. Kay leaned closer, her scales reflecting the soft light. "The Peace Council has been coordinating attacks on both our trading routes, making each side think the other was responsible, and supplying weapons to the raiders," Jack added, scrolling through the data on his portable reader. "Advanced tech stolen from both our peoples, modified so it couldn't be traced." A deep rumble of anger came from Kay's chest. "They kept us fighting while they grew rich from our conflict. My people lost good warriors in those raids. Your people lost ships and colonies. And every time we came close to peace talks." Jack's eyes widened as he read further. "They'd stage an incident, make it look like one side had betrayed the other." Kay's hand clenched into a fist. 3 days ago, I received orders to investigate unusual energy readings in this sector. Now I see it was a trap. They meant for us to fight each other, not find this evidence." "Same here," Jack said. "But they didn't count on the cold forcing us to work together." He looked at Kay with a slight smile. "Ironic, isn't it? Their trap ended up proving we could cooperate." Kay's mandibles clicked in agreement. "The question now is how to get this information to our leaders. The Peace Council will try to stop us. Those raiders who escaped will report back. And more will come," Jack finished. "We need to send a message, something that'll get both our people's attention." He reached for the raiders' communication device, an idea forming. "Your ship's emergency beacon. Could we modify it? Use it to broadcast on both human and Mountain Empire frequencies." Kay's eyes lit up with understanding. "If we combine it with parts from your suit's transmitter, yes. But the cold will kill you if you remove more parts from your suit." "Not if we work fast," Jack said. He pulled out his toolkit. "And not if we stay close to your heat. Besides, we don't have a choice. This might be our only chance to stop a war." They worked together, Kay's strength and Jack's technical skills complementing each other perfectly. They modified the beacon, adding components from Jack's suit and the Raiders' equipment. "There," Jack said finally, connecting the last wire. "It'll broadcast everything we found. The Peace Council won't be able to stop it once it starts." Kay examined their work with approval. "Your human ingenuity continues to impress me. Now let me add something." She pressed her hand to the device, allowing it to scan her military codes. "This will make my people listen. They'll know it's from a high-ranking commander. And the human frequencies will catch my people's attention." Jack added, "Nobody's ever broadcast on both at once. They'll have to investigate." Just then, they heard more engines in the distance, larger ones this time. "More raiders?" Jack asked, but Kay shook her head. "No, different engine pattern. These are warships." Her expression was grim. "The Peace Council must have sent their own forces to silence us." Jack's hand found the activation switch on their modified beacon. "Then we make our message heard first." He looked at Kay. "Together." Kay placed her scaled hand over his. "Together, human. Let them come. We have truth on our side now." As one, they pressed the switch. Their message began broadcasting across the stars, while above them, unknown ships descended through the endless storm. But this time, they weren't facing the threat alone. The Peace Council warships landed in a circle around the crash site, their engines melting the snow beneath them. Jack and Kay watched from their position inside the damaged ship, their modified beacon still broadcasting its message to the stars. 6 ships, Kay counted, her voice low. "Heavy assault class. They're not here to talk." "Then we make them listen," Jack said, checking the heat-activated weapon she had given him. "The beacon needs 5 more minutes to transmit all the data. We just have to hold them off." Kay's scales shifted to a deeper color, battle-ready. "In the Mountain Empire, we have a saying. Those who fight back-to-back need never watch behind them. I've got your back if you've got mine." Jack agreed, moving into position. Armed troops began emerging from the warships, their armor bearing the Peace Council's symbols openly now. They moved with military precision, surrounding the crashed ship. "Surrender immediately," a voice boomed through external speakers. "You are in possession of classified materials. This is your only warning." Kay's answer was a precise shot that disabled the nearest warship's communication array. The battle erupted instantly. Peace Council troops charged forward, while Jack and Kay defended their position from different angles of the ship. "The cold is still our ally," Kay called out, picking off troops who moved too slowly in their thermal gear. "They can't stay exposed for long." Jack used this to their advantage, targeting environmental systems and forcing the troops to retreat repeatedly to their ships. His smaller size let him slip through gaps in the hull that Kay's attackers never expected, surprising them from unexpected angles. But the Peace Council forces kept coming. A blast caught Kay in her injured leg, making her stumble. Jack was there instantly, pulling her to cover while returning fire. "The beacon?" Kay asked through gritted teeth. Jack checked the device. 2 more minutes, but they're getting closer. Then we give them something bigger to worry about." Kay pulled out a thermal detonator, a powerful explosive from her ship's emergency weapons. "Help me reach the nearest warship." Understanding her plan, Jack provided covering fire while Kay moved forward, using the storm and wreckage as cover. She planted the detonator on the warship's hull, then sprinted back as best she could with her injury. The explosion was massive, the warship's systems overloading in a chain reaction. The Peace Council forces scattered in confusion, their coordinated attack breaking down. "Beacon transmission complete," Jack announced. "The data is out there. Both our peoples will know the truth now." New engine sounds filled the air, different from the Peace Council ships. Kay's eyes widened in recognition. "Mountain Empire assault carriers," she said. "And those others. Human Defense Force ships," Jack finished, grinning. "Looks like our message got through." The Peace Council forces found themselves caught between two angry fleets, their deception exposed at last. It was over in minutes, their troops surrendering as ships from both species landed around them. In the aftermath, as medical teams from both sides approached the crash site, Kay turned to Jack. "You know what this means?" she asked. Both our fleets responded together. "They're already cooperating." Jack nodded, watching human and Mountain Empire soldiers working side by side to secure the area. Maybe that's all our peoples ever needed, a reason to trust each other. "It took being trapped in a sleeping pod with a human to show me the truth," Kay said, her mandibles clicking in amusement. "Sometimes the coldest places can warm the oldest hatred." As they were led to the medical ships, walking together despite offers of separate transport, Jack looked back at the sleeping pod that had saved their lives. "You know what," he said, "I never thought I'd say this to a Mountain Empire warrior, but thanks for sharing your heat." Kay's laugh echoed across the snow. "And I never thought I'd say this to a human, but thanks for being worth saving." Above them, ships from both their peoples flew together through the clearing storm, marking the beginning of a new era of cooperation. Sometimes, it took nearly freezing to death beside your enemy to realize they weren't really your enemy at all.